Hi, common viewers. Welcome to Strictly for You. So, along with the emergence of nations, kingdoms, civilizations, you also find this concept of deity in different cultures, aspects of deity, principles of deity, or gods, right? Um, you observe Sumeria, they had their own ideas on deity, they had their own gods. um, you observe Egypt, they had their own principles of or aspects of deity. In fact, when it comes to Egypt, the civilization in the Nile Valley, the African civilization in the Nile Valley, when you dive deep into their literature, their teachings, you find that those aspects and principles of deity are also like states of consciousness, and everything is just happening in cycles. In fact, if you go to also the Mayan literature and the Aztec literature, you find them having the same, um, not exactly the same thing, but they have aspects of, they have deities. They have 13 deities presiding over the 13 heavens, and also the 13 days, because their stuff happens in 13-day counts. And also, there's also these natural aspects that their deities seem to preside over. And go to the Greeks, you find that they have their own pantheon in Mount Olympus. Um, in fact, they in Greece, you have these gods and one god who presides over them. Um, the Romans, they have the same kind of thing, and but the Roman gods just seem to be derivatives of the Greeks, just with different names. When you find, actually today they're still being venerated. The planet Neptune. Neptune is a god. I think it's a god of the waters or something like that. Venus. Those are gods. So the Roman gods are still being venerated in our society. In case you didn't know, even when you go to Norse mythology, they have their own gods, they have their own aspects, they have their own ideas of deity. um, One thing that sets them apart is there's other civilizations whose aspect of deity has nothing to do with something out there in the sky or in the seas. It has to do with something within you. You know, different dynastic periods in Egypt have also this idea of different aspects of deity. In fact, the idea of monotheism is said to be first brought forth by Akhenaten, who was just one of the kings in Egypt. He spoke of this one God. Um, Now, when you go to the nation of Israel, which they are the Hebrew nation of Israel, their literature, you find it in the Bible. They're said to, before the beginning of that nation, there's this amount of time that is spent in Egypt, and Moses is said to be learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. They called Egypt Mitzrayim, but the people of that land called it the land of Kemet. And that civilization in the Nile Valley, which today we call Egypt, came from Egyptus, and came from Het Kaptos, and came from Het Kapata, right? Now, when you learn more about these different civilizations, you realize they had this idea of a god, obviously. And one thing that you keep on seeing is that there seemed to be this observation of naturally occurring phenomena, and those attributes that are observed, that are perceived, they're encapsulated in a name. And that name is imputed on a formed object. And they will say, the Greeks, for example, will say that's Helios, the god of the sky. So Helios is said to be this god who carries the sun in his wings as it rises from the east to the west. And of course, I think maybe they later learned in science that it's not actually the sun that is rising, but we still use that for the sake of language. Anyway, so, but what then is this concept of, because different civilizations, they have this, I mean, even at the rise of the caliphs, the caliphate, they also come with their idea of their God, right? Now, but then what is this thing? What is this thing that is being called God? There were these, when you also read in biblical literature, there's an instance where Paul is actually talking to the men of Athens, and then he says to the men of Athens, I was walking by and then I saw an inscription on an altar which said, to the unknown God. He said, him that you worship unknowingly, I declare him to you. So those people seem to be having all these different gods. It was just all different aspects of one deity, it seems. But this very same deities, he said, this very same deity, this very same principle or aspect of deity is said to not dwell in a temple made with man's hands. What is a temple? A temple is that juncture between the formless dimension and the formed dimension. The invisible phenomena and the visible phenomena. A temple is that juncture between the two. In fact, you can actually learn the very same thing probably in your religious literature. So now, what is this thing? Where does it dwell? What is this entity? Where does it stay? When you study again in the very same literature, it seemed to be said that there's this allusion that this God does not, this thing that other people have been calling God, does not dwell in physical buildings, but it dwells within humans, and the body of a human being is the temple of this entity. What this person called Paul is saying, something that already has been alluded to by another one called Jesus, because you hear, of course, the word Jesus is it's just a English transliteration from a Hebrew name, a Greek name, which is actually taken from a Hebrew name, goes from Yeshua or Yahushua to Jesus, and you can find that play of Zeus there, and then it comes to be called Jesus in the English language. So now this very same person alludes to the very same thing as Paul, saying, look, the person who you call your God, I call that person my source. I call that entity my Father, right? And that Father who is in heaven, that Father is in heaven, but not up there in the sky, but within me. So that Father is within me. And you are told to seek the kingdom meaning the dimension of the formless. Seek that kingdom. And where is it? It's not up there in the sky or in the seas. It's something that you must seek, and the kingdom is within you. So you don't go out there to seek it. You find it within you. And that's the dimension where this entity that is called God, this deity, this is where it's said to dwell. And if it's one with you, then who are you? I think you'll answer that question yourself.